I'm not impressed. I'm not impressed. This is Europe. It should be the final countdown. Do you know, yesterday, my opening thing when I took over from James Well, because he was ill yesterday as well, I had Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears in honour of the way that I'd voted in two recent polls. Won the Brexit referendum and won the European election. Now, you might be able to guess which way I voted. Well, look, I'm completely honest. I'm not that keen on the EU. I used to work there. I know exactly how bad it is. But, you know, there are some people who are really, really keen on the EU. They think it's marvellous. And one of them is Alistair Campbell, the great spin doctor who, you know, was hugely popular within the Labour movement throughout his time working for Tony Blair. But he's been expelled from the Labour Party, and he says he's going to fight it because he supported the Liberal Democrats. Now, remember, Lord Heseltine said he was supporting the Liberal Democrats as well, but he just got his whip removed from the House of Lords, whereas Alastair Campbell gets expelled from the Labour Party. By the way, the Labour Party don't expel you if you get accused of racism, anti-Semitism. Not worried about that, but what they will expel you for is supporting the Liberal Democrats. Now, even I do not think that supporting the Liberal Democrats is as bad as potentially supporting people who have nasty and racist views. But, you know, there is some debate over it. Whether the people that are accused of anti-Semitism are guilty remains unproved. And similarly, they say that they have a legitimate right to criticise the state of Israel. If you have a view on it, please do give me a call, 0344 499 1000. But in the meantime, I'm joined by the lovely Michael Segalov from Vice and The Guardian, who is, it's fair to say, not of the same political mind as me, is in fact a Corbynista. Michael, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Not at all.
Now, I understand you have to go to Bristol at 8 o'clock.
Ideally, yes.
What's that all about?
I'm babysitting tomorrow for my nephew, so getting in early.
He's babysitting. So, look, there is some element of community decency that we're having on display here at Talk Radio. OK, so you presumably are a big supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. You think what the Equality and Human Rights Commission has done today is wrong, and you're not a big fan of Alastair Campbell. Justify that position.
Oh, where to start? Let's start with Campbell, because I think it's actually much more clear-cut than most people are making out. There's a rule in the Labour Party rule book, it's in front of me right now, which makes it perfectly clear that if you're a member of the Labour Party and you support a political organisation other than the party or support candidates who stand against them, it goes on. It's pretty explicit that if you go around supporting other parties, then you'll be expelled from the party. It's an automatic ineligibility to be in the Labour Party. Alistair knew this. He's not some, poor random member who didn't understand the regulations and rules. And so when he, explicitly and openly went around saying he'd voted for the Liberal Democrats, I'm not really sure what he expected. Now, I've got some sympathy with Alistair on this specific issue. I voted to remain in the European Union. Whilst I appreciate the way the Labour Party has handled its position so far, I'm sure we can discuss this later, I would personally like to see us remain in the EU. And had I decided to vote, like many others did, for a different party, secretly in a secret ballot, as is the law, you don't get asked who you vote for, then I think no one would have any issue with Alistair having done so. The issue was him publicly saying that he'd voted for another party. And if that's what the rules say, that's what the rules say.
But hang on. I've been told consistently by Labour Party leadership, general secretaries, party leaders, all this, that in their disciplinary system, there is a massive backlog.
Yes.
That's why they can't deal with all these guys who are publicly supporting Hamas. Well, and yet, with Alastair Campbell, that backlog seemed to evaporate.
Yes, well, and I think there is a distinction to be made here. Now, we can discuss at great length, and I've written at great length about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and could tell you in great detail the specific regulations that should be changed. But on this, I think it's an unfair comparison, solely because Alastair Campbell didn't deny what he'd done. There's no question over whether he did or didn't vote for that party. It's a black and white issue, and he admitted to it. And so I think your analogy, in the same way we don't expect every court case in British courts to last the same amount of time, it'll depend on two things in particular. Firstly, a plea of guilty or innocent or not guilty, and the second of the seriousness and complexity of the crime. Alastair Campbell admitted he voted for another party. The rules are very clear on it, and so the outcome is the outcome, and it shouldn't be of any great surprise. And I don't really think it was of much surprise to Alastair. I think he knew what was coming.
Do you think he's pleased about this? Because he is a political beast. He is somebody that understands media manipulation. You know, it's probably got him a peerage from the Liberal Democrats.
Potentially.
You know, they're going to be quite keen on it. But is this something that he's done deliberately to highlight the issue and to take on and challenge Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, yes, I mean, there's no doubt Alastair Campbell's MO for the last few years has been to challenge Corbyn and his leadership, and of course he cares about Europe as well. I was thinking about what was going through Alastair's mind today. I definitely think he knew what he was doing. I suspect he wasn't sure what the outcome would be. I suspect he thought potentially, given the shift in position that might be happening, he'd get away with it and be able to rustle some feathers. But ultimately, I have to come down on this idea that he knew the rules and regulations. He'd been asked about it explicitly by another Guardian journalist just a few months before in a video interview. And he said he knew what was going to happen if he did it. And he decided to go out there. And I actually think, as someone who does believe in remaining in the European Union, he's to some extent made this all about him today. If people who'd gone off and voted for those Remain parties in the European elections did so and did send a message to the Labour Party, Alistair himself has seen that shift in position. And lots of those people who voted for those other Remain parties will have been Labour members and Labour supporters. And they did so silently and quietly. And that's the point of democracy, is we don't go around saying how we voted, necessarily. Alistair did that himself. He voted Lib Dem.
But Michael, there's an argument against that, which is this. The members of any political party own that political party. If that political party is so badly led that thousands upon thousands, maybe even 100,000 of the members, we don't know, we can't know.
We'll never know.
Might have voted for the Liberal Democrats
Sure.
or the Greens. Isn't it an incumbent duty of one of the members to stand up and say, hey, you know, you guys are shortchanging us?
I don't think anyone can say Alastair Campbell's been silently sitting around waiting to criticise the party. And also, like, I know the numbers look bigger in the Labour Party because the Labour Party has got a bigger membership, but let's not forget that the Tories had their worst election outcome since 1832, and the only reason 100,000 members didn't vote for the Tories is they haven't got 100,000 members. But yes, I do think it's incumbent on Labour Party members to involve themselves and engage themselves in processes that have, amongst other things, both set the Labour Party rulebook, i.e. the very rule that Alastair Campbell has fallen foul of, could change through democratic process. I also think it's right that Labour Party members engage in the policies around the European Union and do, as Alistair has done more than nearly anyone else, make their voice heard in that sense. But while the rules are the rules, they have to be abided by. And I just think that it's kind of a distraction from the bigger question around Brexit and Labour's position, what Alistair has done. And I think he knew that. And I think maybe he likes the attention. Maybe he wanted people to talk more about the people's vote, his kind of love child, rather than Labour and its policies on it. But today, I really hoped we'd be talking about how Labour's position might need to shift now to somewhere slightly different on Brexit. And instead, we're talking once again about Alastair Campbell.
OK, I was on a TV show that I work on as a contributor earlier today, and we were talking about the fact that, you know, major political parties have let down their own supporters. And the fact that, you know, I don't think it's enough to say that the European elections are a free hit and that nobody cares. I think that actually people have been actively put off the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And, you know, in the case of the Labour Party, that's because they haven't decided what their policy is. What is the solution to that? Apart from the obvious, clarify the policy. But of course, what is the policy you clarify?
Well, precisely. I mean, I don't think that Labour's been unclear on its policy. I think the policy isn't clear. And I think there's been... that, to me, is a distinction to make. The kind of mishmash of ideas that came out of the last Labour conference was really a fudge. I mean, I've been saying that throughout. And I think that what the Labour Party does need to do is take a position. I think it's taken the right position, to my mind, up until now, of trying to straddle both camps to see where everything ended up. Because, and I wrote this in a column for The Guardian a good few months ago now, and this is another issue I have with Campbell, aside from what happened today, is that I genuinely believe if in the aftermath of losing the Brexit referendum, those people who are hugely supportive of Europe had gone out and tried to convince people that they were wrong, to vote to leave, and secondarily looked at the issues, the reasons why Brexit happened, and according to all of the research that's come out of academic institutions, it's related to lack of trust in the political elite, it's to do with austerity, to do with disenfranchisement. If people like Alastair Campbell who'd used their resources, their not considerable wealth that they've been donated to their campaigns, to go out and campaign on those issues, to convince people they're actually, you know, the reasons why they voted Brexit weren't going to be solved or fixed by leaving Europe, I suspect would be in a very different position. Instead, people like Alistair, people like Change UK, the People's Vote campaign, neglected that. They go around saying, you know, you made a mistake the first time, you've done it wrong, and you look at the results from the last the European elections last week. they're not a clear-cut Remain vote. There's a huge surge for the Brexit Party. And again, as a Remainer, as someone who really believes we should stay in Europe, I don't think the outcome of looking at those results is that I'm right and everyone else is wrong.
You know, I often go drinking with my dad in Eastleigh Labour Club in the Leigh constituency, where Andy Burnham was the MP, and, you know, where the Bickershaw and Lightshaw collieries were. Absolute heartland of the Labour Party. You know what? I always tell this story. I don't know if you're going to like this, but I will tell you this to kind of illustrate it. Whenever a member has a birthday on a Saturday night, they buy every other member of the club a bit of food. And there are two options. You can have a meat and potato pie or a meat and potato pasty, right? There is no vegan option. There is no vegetarian option. There is no, there's no kind of, these are hang 'em and flog 'em traditional Labour voters.
Right.
They can't stand Corbyn and they can't stand the EU. And it just strikes me that you're talking about all of these Alistair Campbell type people. But when I see it's kind of Our Future, Our Voice or whatever they're called, those guys wouldn't last 5 minutes in the traditional Labour heartlands.
I agree. And this is what's really interesting. And I think we often let this discussion about Brexit be defined by other rifts in the Labour Party.
Yeah.
And especially because, Corbyn's leadership has been tumultuous and there's been some opposition. It kind of gets confused within that narrative of left versus right. But it's really not the case. You look at people like Gloria De Piero, Lisa Nandy, two MPs who represent Leave constituencies and are, very against having a second referendum. They're not on the left of the party. They're not Corbyn supporters. And the same with people like Clive Lewis, Lloyd Russell-Mule, very left-wing, some of the most left-wing Labour Party MPs there are, very pro-Remain. This split in the Labour Party isn't defined by left and right politics. And that's what's so complicated. It's not as clear-cut as the membership getting bigger and being heard for the first time under Corbyn, in a long time at least. It's about a real divide that swept the country and has swept every single party. And so you're right, I'm sure there are loads of Labour members in the heartlands in the northwest and the northeast who are ardent leavers. At the same time, you go to kind of bars and pubs and restaurants near where I live in North London.
Hampstead.
Not quite, but not far, in Hackney. And I'm sure if you spoke to most Labour members, they're all Remainers and feel really let down that Labour's not taken their side. There's no simple answer to this.
So just let me think about this for a minute. Kate Hoey has publicly said that Nigel Farage should be part of the Brexit negotiation team. Should she be expelled from the Labour Party?
Yes. That said, there probably is a distinction, if I'm being fair, between saying explicitly you voted for or support another party and saying that you respect or like someone else or think that they could do... I think that it's... let me give you an example.
Well, I'll give you an example. Let me just say this to you, because
Yes.
actually, here's the important point. You want Kate Hoey thrown out of the Labour Party because she's plainly not a Labour supporter.
Yes.
Right, OK. Would it be wrong for Alistair Campbell, say, to have said that he wanted Nigel Farage to be one of the negotiators? Is the fact that you are engaging with the Brexit Party in of itself wrong?
Engaging in what sense? I think it's perfectly reasonable that Labour and the Tories had cross-party discussions about Brexit. I don't think you exist in a vacuum. Let me give you an example, because I was thinking today about this and how I felt. In 2015, I interviewed Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell in the Houses of Parliament before the general election, before the leadership election. I just sat down and asked them a bunch of questions. And I was living in Brighton Pavilion at the time, Caroline Lucas, the only Green MP's seat. And her politics were much more in line with what I believed then, and what I believe now is the same, but the Labour Party shifted. But I wanted to vote for Caroline Lucas, and I asked these two backbench Labour MPs who, certainly weren't loyal to the party whip on a regular basis. I asked them explicitly if I should vote for Caroline Lucas, a woman whose policies and politics and ideas clearly aligned more to theirs than Miliband's manifesto, and they wouldn't say I should. They said quite clearly, we're in one party, she's in another, we're a socialist party, and this party actually is what we think it is, and the leadership aren't listening. So, and I think that's really important to remember. And it might just be a specific thing, but I think it's being a stickler for those rules. If you genuinely believe in democracy in the party, and you believe the rules and regulations that members must abide by are set by members, then if you breach one of those rules and regulations, you should do it. In the same way Corbyn and McDonnell told me to vote Labour, not Caroline Lucas, I think Alistair Campbell shouldn't go around saying you should vote Lib Dem.